Before we start, I wanna know where in the meeting do I ask the question with regards to a response that was given to Mr. Kaplan from the last meeting. You let me know when I can chime in, okay?
Is it related to the minutes?
Yes, related to the minutes that we
So
were
then we
to.
discuss the minutes.
Okay,
Yeah, that'll be the first agenda.
okay.
Okay, we are ready to start. Go.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to NYCHA's Audit and Finance Committee meeting for Friday, September 13th. Welcoming everyone to the meeting, including our external auditors, Deloitte, who are here to give a presentation to you today, later on in the meeting. So again, just to reiterate some things Anil said, if you're a presenter, please make sure to turn your microphone on and to turn it off when you are not speaking. Please put all of your mobile phones and devices on silent mode. And I think with that, we are ready for the roll call.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So we have with us from Audit and Finance Committee, Mr. Victor Gonzalez,
Here,
Mr. Mark Kaplan. Here. Richard Koo.
Present.
From Internal Audit, Cassie Ward.
Present.
Myself, Anil Agrawal. We also have from Finance, to my right, Ayat Lee,
Here.
Jeff Lesnoy.
Present.
From Deloitte, we have Jill Strohmeyer,
Present.
Darshan Patel,
Present.
Bobby Soni,
Here.
Erika Block.
Here.
Okay, and then from Finance, we also have Arlene Nieves, Amita Patel,
Present.
Judith Francis, Pakon Ho, Sangbu Kim. From Compliance, we have Brad Greenberg. From Law, Jason Goldberg.
Here.
From IT, Roger Shields.
Present.
From the CEO's office, Vilma Huertas.
Present.
I think that's all we have, and we have the quorum in terms of the Audit and Finance Committee, so we can start the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Anil. So the first item on the agenda for today is the approval of the Audit and Finance Committee meeting minutes from June 11th, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve those?
I need to, before we approve, a question that I need answered with regards to a response that was given from the last meeting. Is this the time or no? Okay, then,
Right, so would the answer to that question impact your vote on whether you would approve the minutes or not?
oh, not at all.
Okay, so then let's take the vote and then we'll discuss whatever the open issue is.
I
Okay.
have a couple of questions or comments on the
Okay.
minutes. First of all, on page 9, we have a separate motion made in a footnote. And that's a little unusual. Rather than, it should be in the body of the minutes, not a footnote. And secondly, on page 4, there's a reference to the bond portfolio. The bonds are issued generally in the 1% plus or minus range. You're talking about, that's the coupon
The interest rate.
in the interest, there's something missing there. Whoops, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Where are we looking on page 4?
Pardon me?
Where on page 4 are we looking? Sorry?
Yeah, let me go back. On page 4,
Yeah.
there's a statement that the bond portfolio, the bonds were issued generally in the 1% range,
Oh, I see, okay.
plus or minus. What does that mean? That's the coupon?
Yes, it means it could be up to 110, 90
No, I
basis
understand, I
points.
just think that the language could be a little clearer, that's all. And then the footnote on page 9 should be in the body of the minutes, not a footnote. Oh.
Okay, I
That's
think.
it.
Yep, sorry, go ahead. Oh, that's it. I think that we're fine to make those edits to the minutes. So in that case, I would ask that there be a motion to approve the minutes from June 11th, 2020.
I have a question.
Oh, please, yep.
On page 4, and what's page 4, isn't it? On page 2, it says, NYCHA also has some mobile boilers which are not particularly large. What is the meaning of large? Is it size, or is it money, or what does large mean?
Dollar value.
So that should be spelled out, are not particularly large in dollar value, but are still recorded. Because it could be interpreted in several different ways.
Thank you for pointing that out. We can certainly make that edit as well.
So it's not particularly large in dollar value.
Sure, we can definitely add that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for raising that.
I have nothing further.
Anything else, any other comments or any
I
other
have
feedback?
nothing further.
So I might as well bring that up now, alright?
Well, only if it would impact your vote on approving the minutes or not.
No,
Okay, so then let's take the vote.
okay.
So the vote will be to approve the June 11th, 2024 meeting minutes, subject to the 3 edits discussed. Do we have that motion?
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Sorry.
Aye.
No, no worries.
Aye.
Aye.
I'm in an audit committee, toilet.
Mr. Kaplan, do you?
I approve.
Okay, excellent. So in that case, the motion is carried. And, okay, I think before we move on to our single audit presentations, Mr. Gonzalez, if you had
Yes.
something else you want to raise about the minutes?
Yes. So in the minutes, there was a response to a question that Mr. Kaplan had raised in the previous meeting, sorry. And it referenced the Safety Associate Program. It's under Safe NYCHA. And so my question, and all I need is an answer to kind of like explain, in this particular aspect, this associate, you know, what's the criteria for this associate to be picked? What knowledge do they need or possess to qualify for the position? And who appoints this person to that position? And then is that reported to anyone?
So I think that these questions were all responded to. I apologize if maybe the response got lost somewhere in the shuffle of all the materials being sent, but I do believe that we provided a response to all of those questions in an addendum to.
And an addendum.
And an addendum to.
I never received that.
Okay, we can make sure that gets resent to you and we can confirm receipt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is that it on that item? Okay, so in that case, I think we can move on to Deloitte's presentation on the 2023 single audit.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Good morning. So I'm going to walk the committee members through Deloitte's current status of the single audit. So just to remind the committee members, as part of our single audit, we will be issuing 3 independent auditors report. The first is the reissuance of our independent auditor's opinion over the financial statements, which were reviewed by this committee in the June meeting. That original opinion referenced the AICPA auditing standards. When it's reissued later this month, it will reference both the AICPA auditing standards as well as government auditing standards as required by the single audit. The second report we will issue will be a report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters based on an audit of financial statements performed in accordance with government auditing standards. This is what we refer to as our Yellow Book report. This Yellow Book report is where if there were any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control over financial reporting, so over the financial statements themselves, they would be reported here. We have no findings of those significance, so this report will be unmodified and clean, so to speak, nothing to report. The third report that we will issue is our compliance on each major federal program and report on internal controls over compliance and a report on the actual schedule of expenditures of federal awards, or the SEPA. This is the Uniform Guidance Report. This is the report that's specific to your federal dollar spend. Just a reminder that this report, while it looks like it's just one report, it actually I like to think of it as 18 different opinions that are going to be included in one report, because we do test 3 of your grants as major programs, and each of those grants have approximately 6 compliance requirements that we're required to test. Because there's 3 grants, 6 compliance requirements, and each compliance requirement gets its own opinion. There are approximately 18 opinions that will be included in this report. 17 of those opinions will be clean, unmodified, no findings to report, at this time anyway. There is one compliance requirement similar to last year, related to program 14.850 and special tests related to the lead paint and other environmental contaminants, where we will be reporting again a material finding and a qualification on that compliance requirement on that grant. So all the other compliance requirements related to the grant are clean, unmodified. It's just, again, this one item, similar to what we have discussed last year. And then finally, upon completion, there will also be a special agreed upon procedures report related to REACT upload that we will issue. All of these reports are slated to be finalized and issued before September 30th. September 30th is NYCHA's required filing date with the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. That date is set as 9 months after your fiscal year end. So within your documents today, I'm kind of taking items, I think it's items 3 and 4, and I'm really reviewing them together, my presentation and the single audit reporting package. But in your package, you do have a SEPA, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. In 2023, NYCHA had approximately $4 billion of federal expenditures across various grant programs. Upon receipt of this SEPA, the first thing that Deloitte does is perform a risk assessment. We have to go through your grant programs and determine which ones are going to be selected for testing this year. The way that we do that is really quite standard for all accounting firms that perform single audits. There are set guidelines, thresholds that are set by the Office of Management and Budget, by which we follow to determine which programs we'll test. The first step that we take is to determine if you have any Type A programs. Type A programs are your largest grant programs. And your threshold is established at approximately $12 million. Any grant program larger than $12 million is considered a Type A program, and we are required to determine if we need to do test work on any of those Type A programs. You had 5 Type A programs this year, and upon completion of our risk assessment process, we tested 3 of those programs as major. The Type B threshold are what I'll call your middle-sized grant programs. They're not your largest and they're not your smallest, they kind of sit in the middle. So any grant program between approximately $3 million and $12 million is considered a Type B program, and Deloitte would then also risk assess Type B programs. You had no grant programs that were considered Type B in this range. Anything under $3 million is not subject to testing by the Deloitte team. The 3 Type A programs that we did select as major programs for testing this year comprised approximately $2.1 billion of your total federal expenditures. So we subjected to testing approximately 53% of your federal spend. The 3 grant programs we selected were 14. I'm gonna mention some ALN numbers. These are the numbers that identify these programs by the federal awarding agencies. Your HUD program 14.850, which is your Public Indian Housing Operating Grant Program, was selected. Your HUD program 14.872, which is your Public Housing Capital Fund Program. And finally, HUD program 14.218, which is your Community Development Block Grant, your CDBG, Entitlement Grants Cluster. At the back of your single audit reporting package is the details of the one material weakness that we have identified so far this year. Again, this relates to your Public and Indian Housing Program 14.850, and this has to do with our special tests and provisions related to environmental contaminants testing and remediation. Essentially, this relates to a requirement that all of your environmental contaminants identified have been remediated throughout the year, which I know we've discussed in the past that, NYCHA has a long program, a long year program, multiple year program to remediate environmental contaminants throughout the organization. And unfortunately, the way that this is written, it talks about being remediated in 1 year. So hence the finding that we reported last year and again this year. We do have one additional finding at this time related to the same program, Public and Indian Housing Grant 14.850. It relates to eligibility. At this point in time, during our test work, we asked for documentation and audit evidence for 60 samples. And some of the documentation that we requested related to our 60 samples cannot be identified or provided to the Deloitte team. And because of that, we do have a finding that is considered to be a low-level deficiency related to documentation being maintained for eligibility requirements related to this grant program. This is also similar to the finding that we reported last year for this grant as well. And finally, this last slide, there are some open items that are still pending completion for various grant programs, or actually all 3 grants that are being tested. There's some information that we're still waiting for in order to conclude on our final testing and results. It spans procurement, wage rate compliance, reporting, and then additional special tests and provisions. If additional findings do come up because of the audit evidence we obtain of any severity, whether it's a low D or something that rises to a higher severity, we will report back to this committee. If we don't report back to this committee, then these have been cleared as satisfied with no additional findings.
Jill, if I can interject, the 2 for procurement, there are quite a few missing documents at this point in time. There are RFP evaluations, there are vendor name checks, there are DOI approvals, there's dispart certifications. So the procurement team is actively looking for those documents. We don't know whether they'll be able to locate all of them at this point in time. They've just been asked to do this a couple of days ago to find missing documents. So we're somewhat optimistic, but we don't know the result of this. These could result in a deficiency. And one other item, which is the utility item. What's the number of the utility item? What's the number?
1850103.
14850-103. This is a unique item where one of our utility companies, NYCHA, does not bill at the same level that HUD may be looking for. So billing dollar amount at the meter, at the development level per meter. And we have data based on consumption at development per meter. So we're trying to work that through and identify another path to meeting the documentation requirements. We don't know if this will result in a deficiency or not. We think it's a minor deficiency, if anything, but I just want to point that out in advance. As far as the other 5 are concerned, I think the team is actively working on resolving these issues. And these are basically document requests which are still outstanding. We believe we'll be able to satisfy the requests, but we don't know the answer for sure.
So if there are any questions on Deloitte's presentation,
few
I could field them.
On this last point that Mr. Lesnoy raised about the utility NYCHA bills, is that why the overall utility bills and the financials went down? Because we couldn't identify what the NYCHA costs were?
No, that's unrelated. We reflect 100% of the utility costs on the financial statements,
Okay,
regardless of what development is in.
so it's a matter of methodology in terms of NYCHA?
Yes,
Okay, not their actual numbers?
that's correct.
Okay. Jill, in terms of the 14850 eligibility question, I know you said it's a low-level deficiency, but as I read the issue, it was that the interviewer was not getting sufficient information from the client in terms of eligibility at the PHA level, at the housing level. There's a sample of 60, but if this is a problem system-wide eligibility, then that would be a very large problem, would it not?
So when we looked at, we have to go through a process to determine what level of severity this may end up. And there is an element of professional judgment. And overall eligibility, there are a number of documents that we're required to see. It's not just one form, but a number of forms. And so over 60 samples, there's approximately 540 pieces of documentation that we receive and review to fulfill the requirements. And so when we look at 540 pieces of documentation that we reviewed and audited, and there were approximately, was it seven individual documentation pieces that were missing. When you say 7 out of 540,
I see.
that's why we landed on the low level D on this deficiency.
I see. And that was, and the reason for the deficiency was because they were not documenting, or they were not asking the client for this information. I mean, what was the?
Yeah, I don't think that can be concluded. I think in most, if not all cases, the documents are very old. Tenants might have been in the properties for 20, 30, 40 years. The documents were lost, they were damaged in floods, they were damaged in hurricanes. There are all these different type of reasons. There's a digitization process that's been in place in the Siebel system for more than 10 years.
Okay.
And since that point, on a going forward basis, documents have been scanned into the system. So there's always a digital copy of it. But I think for majority, if not all, of the applications and other kind of documents that are missing, they tend to be older documents, which kind of got lost along the way. So we don't have any evidence that the documents were never requested, but the documents can't be located at this point.
Not readily available.
Yes.
And that's being updated then, I gather. I mean, the information that we require, because this is really important, because it has to do with whether or not the client has changed their status in terms of number of people in their apartment or whatever, right?
Well, I think if there's updated documentation requirement, that isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the original applications, the original release forms that were done when the tenants originally applied.
Right.
So you can't update that. I mean, you either have it or you don't have it.
Right, but over time, that changes.
Yes,
May I answer that? There's an annual recertification every year
Right.
where they have to determine and report to NYCHA
Right.
exactly how many individuals are living there,
Right.
what's the income. So every year that gets updated.
Okay.
I think they're talking about the original point.
Oh, the
when it all
original
started.
documents, not the updated documents.
Out of 7 documents missing, 5 is application, original application. That is initially when they got the apartment. So that might be most likely misplaced, kind of.
Okay, and the last question I have is on the Indian Capital Program. Public housing Indian, I don't know why they call it Indian, but I guess that goes way back to the
That's
ancient history.
OMB has named that as a word Indian in there.
Well, some people would take offense at that too, I would think.
Yeah, that is official name of
And they
that
have to
program.
change the name to Guardian, Public Guardian Program. But in any event, here's the question. Is the capital, that could be edited from the, in that capital program, is there money available for operating expenses in that capital program? Even though it's called capital, are there operating expenses that are eligible for reimbursement under that program? Under the capital program, Indian capital program?
Yeah, there's certain percent that you're allowed to transfer from the capital fund for operating purpose.
So the term capital includes operating.
Yeah, the one that's eligible to transfer to the operating program for the operating use.
I see, so.
But it's under the portfolio of the capital fund program, and then we had to make an operating transfer when we draw down the money from the capital fund program.
Oh. Okay,
And Mr. Koo, again, this is, the title of the program is determined by the Office of Management Budget, someone at HUD. That's something we cannot change. We have to report the name
Okay.
of that grant as it's out there in the compliance supplement and it's
Okay.
named by HUD and others. So it doesn't say that operating in the title doesn't mean that there's not a component, as I mentioned, of operating use of those federal dollars.
I see. So you know the difference, you know the percentage of operating versus capital in that program? For NYCHA,
I believe it's 50%, yeah.
50%? Okay, so it's capital and operating program. Thank you. That's a little question to me.
I have an overall question. In your, we had the scandal about what happened at the various locations, which reflected a substantial problem with the management of the operation. Did that cause you to do anything in your auditing of everything here?
Yes, so to start, we did do additional, I believe you're referring to the micro purchases. That was something that was, made known back in February of 2024, am I correct, Mr. Kaplan?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, Deloitte did react to that. We had several conversations internally around how we needed to vary the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. Then we had several conversations with various members of the NYCHA executive management team to understand the situation, the severity of the situation, magnitude. And we did do direct audit procedures around procurement and micro purchases during the financial statement audit back in May and June, above and beyond what we would normally have done. And then we are looking at procurement very closely right now as we speak around micro purchases. And one item that's coming up is the disbarment, and whether or not disbarment documentation is being maintained by the organization related to micro purchases. And so the answer is yes, we are looking at this. We've done work in May and June, and we're finishing up some work here as well on the topic.
Thank you, that's comforting. I find one thing that'll amuse you, there's at least one typo. If you go to page 158, footnote 2, it's a period 1 there. I don't think that's right.
You're right.
It's only a typo, it's a period, that's all, it's not.
Oh,
And I think you've answered, your comments have answered my questions before giving.
Nothing further, that covers Deloitte's presentation and agenda items, both 3 and 4.
oh, yeah, okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you, Jill. So with that, we've listened to the presentation of the draft single audit report, and a motion is now in order to recommend approval of the 2023 single audit report to the board. So since we have discussed some pending items, that motion will be subject to the resolution of those items, and we will provide you with updated information as we have it, so that you are in the loop about how those are resolved. So do we have a motion to approve pending resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, so that motion is carried, thank you very much. And moving on to our next agenda item, we have Deloitte's management letter comments for the year ended December 31st, 2023.
Thank you. So I'll continue on. So in your package, as agenda item 5, you will find Deloitte's management letter comments for the year ended December 31, 2023. So these are internal control matters that were identified as part of our financial statement audit that was issued back in June of 2024. Reminder to the committee, there are three severity levels when it comes to internal control deficiencies. The highest level of severity is a material weakness. Then below that is a significant deficiency. And then the lowest level of deficiency would be just something we call a deficiency. And then there are sometimes other matters, if there are a material weakness, a significant deficiency or a deficiency, there's also opportunity to present in this letter perhaps other matters that are not related to your preparation of your financial statements. Within this letter today, we have 3 deficiencies that we'll talk about, so they are all the lowest severity, nothing that rose to a higher level of severity. 2 of the items today relate to IT matters. And matters that are similar to what has been reported in prior years as well, related to access security. The first item relates to application and database password configuration. And our observation, over 23,000 accounts on the application have passwords that are not set to expire, and user accounts should have this password setting enforced. And interactive service accounts with elevated privileges should have passwords rotated annually. In addition, there were passwords to the Oracle databases supporting the Oracle Financials and Siebel applications that are not in compliance with NYCHA's own baseline policy. And the company policy requires some minimum settings, which we identified as not being met during our audit work. In addition, we noted that current password settings for the profiles within the respective databases were also not in compliance with NYCHA's own policy. So it's our recommendation that NYCHA management review the current password settings for these applications and databases and enable settings to follow the authority's own IT password policy, which are strong and in line with best practices. So we have reviewed your policy. We do think your policy is strong. It's now a matter of enforcing NYCHA's own policy related to password security and these application systems. The second one, I'm going to kind of loop them both together and then I'll take questions. The second one also relates to access security, and it's more specific to user deprovisioning. And in this particular instance, it relates to the Oracle Financials application. A user with access to the Oracle Financial application was terminated on December 1, 2023, and thus no longer required access to the system. Based on our review, we noted that the user's access was not disabled until December 29th, so approximately 28 days later, which in our professional judgment is an excessive period of time. And is not in compliance with the authority's own policy, which states that such disabled or users' access should be disabled within 6 to 10 business days. So that's the authority's policy, which wasn't met. As such, the user retained inappropriate access for Oracle for a period of approximately 3 weeks. It's our recommendation that the authority enhance transfer and termination procedures to ensure that the user's access is changed and or disabled within your own policy of 6 to 10 business days. Management has provided responses for both of these comments, and those responses are within your materials. I do have also with me here today my manager Erica Black, who is our IT specialist, so if there's any questions specific to what we've done or what we've seen related to access security, I'm happy to field any questions or turn it to the manager.
And we also have Roger Shields here, Chief Information Security Officer, if you have any questions.
I have a question. The Siebel,
I pronounce it Siebel, but I might be.
is it Siebel or Siebel? Depends on whether they're from Ohio or not.
I'm from Michigan, so it's kind of close.
Anyway,
If you knew the people, you'd say Siebel.
To the people.
anyway, the question is the Siebel account software being used at the PHA level I mean, which, of the two systems, the Oracle and the Siebel, which one is the one that's being used at the PHA level for inputting data and information on the tenants?
That would be Siebel.
That's Siebel. And that's the one that is used in each development now to enter information about each client?
Connections into that are being used at each development.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, there are systems at each of the development that collect data that goes into Siebel.
Okay, so my question, it has to do with access to that system by the local PHA managers or some individuals at the PHA level, and that needs to be certified by Central in terms of the valid use of that system by local PHA folks?
Yeah, so the NYCHA employees and the PHA folks who are entering that data, they've, yes, the NYCHA employees who are, and the PHA admins, they are managed within our internal authentication. So there is a second level of control. If they're removed from NYCHA access, they will lose access to those systems. The accounts that were brought up in these deficiencies, the 23,000 were really user vendor accounts. So these are plumbers and HVAC and other folks who are providing services to NYCHA. They have accounts to come in and look at their invoices and interact with NYCHA in that sense.
Do they have access to modifying any information in that system?
They do not. So those 23,000 accounts was an oversight. The process has been changed so that new accounts are set with the password expiration time within policy. And it's going to take a little bit of time to go in and update all of those existing ones so that there's not an immediate kind of service desk or sort of user support issue.
I see. So the term external users has to do with plumbers and others that have access to the system?
Yeah, external is probably not the best choice in the Oracle accounts, the 23,000 that came up. Those were the vendors that work with NYCHA.
That work with NYCHA?
Yes. And it's read-only access to their own data.
Okay, but is there double checking to make sure that whatever information is put in is not being manipulated in some way?
Yeah, it depends on the specific system, what those controls would be, but yes, there are controls to protect and validate data. Very specifically with the vendor accounts, there's a very manual process in place just to avoid issues where nefarious entities on the internet may try and come in and take over our vendor accounts.
Okay. And the Siebel account, is there also a way to make sure that information is being put in correctly? I mean, I guess my question has to do with, with training at the local PHA level to use the Siebel system. That's my overall question, yes.
Yes, there is a significant amount of training available and some required for any of the PHA admins to use this system. I do want to say that's unrelated to these deficiencies, which were really around the application of password parameters and password policy.
No, I understand that, but the bigger question is question of fraud or potential fraud by not having sufficient controls over who is accessing this information, and B, who is making sure that the information is correct. That's my only concern, because of Mr. Kaplan had raised the micro purchase issue. earlier. And that raised all kinds of questions in my mind as to whether or not there are, sufficient controls at the local level in terms of using databases or using access to information. That's my question. So,
So yes, there are,
in addition to passwords, of course.
yes, there are a number of controls. Obviously, the passwords are required to get them access into these systems. In terms of the micro purchases, there are still approvals that need to happen.
Okay.
But at some level, you have to grant users the ability to do things to conduct their daily business.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me. So you have two systems, Oracle and Siebel. And that's to basically cover what? I mean, obviously they must interact somehow. But I would think that one has a purpose for one thing and the other another. Does one see it overall and maybe Siebel is the child and Oracle is the parent? Or how does that actually work?
They're two big husky stepbrothers that mostly get along. Siebel is predominantly our CRM. It maintains the data that's necessary for managing our tenants and managing the properties. And Oracle is predominantly the financial systems. So where procurement functions may happen is where invoicing may happen, where vendors may interact. But obviously data has to be shared about properties, about work, about other things that are going on.
And they're currently playing nice together.
Most days, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just curious, with all these people without effective controls of access, have you had any incidents in which people have used improperly access?
So we have had at least 3 cases over the last 3 years where vendors have been attacked or compromised. It was not through any of the NYCHA controls, it was through their own. The most recent example was there was a complete email compromise on the part of a particular vendor. So, nefarious entities on the internet were able to get complete control over all the communications with this vendor. The vendor tried to impersonate the CEO and the CFO of the vendor and tried to make changes within NYCHA. Through our manual controls, finance was able to determine that it wasn't correct and stop it from getting too far. So there are definitely nefarious entities out there that are, attacking our vendors and are, hopefully not successfully, but are also looking at weaknesses in our systems.
Not surprising.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one final comment to report to the committee. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand up. One final comment has to do with entity-wide risk assessment. Again, low-level deficiency. This is a comment that was raised by the audit team during our financial statement audit. It relates to entity-wide risk assessment, and so during the performance of our audit, we noted the authority did not formalize a risk assessment, including their fraud risk assessment and information technology risk assessment. We do think that the management going through and performing a risk assessment is a very important and key control, looking at where risks and fraud are within the whole life cycle of the preparation of the financial statements as well as components of IT. We had conversations with management throughout the course of our audit. We were comfortable that an informal process did take place and we saw audit evidence. We had those conversations and we corroborated it through other audit evidence that those were in fact happening informally. Our recommendation here is really for NYCHA to formalize that. You're going through this risk assessment process, you're thinking about all of these things where risk could be, where fraud could occur, to formally document it. And so that's really what this comment is about, documenting a formal risk assessment conclusion.
That's comforting.
So with that concludes my presentation related to the 2023 management letter comments. Are there any other questions? Happy to take them at this time.
As I recall, at one time, the internal audit committee of NYCHA did a risk assessment NYCHA-wide, but it had to do with threats to its to NYCHA's financials overall in terms of budget risk and recession risk and other risks. And I don't know if that was done this year, the overall, I don't think it was done. It was done in previous years. Question, will that be done again in the future by the internal audit group? Or by some other entity within NYCHA? I guess the question is who will do that risk assessment?
Sure, I can speak to that.
Thank you.
Sure. So essentially, we are in pretty much the final stages of onboarding a vendor who will be working with our department, the Internal Audit and Assessment Department, which I think there have been discussions about before I got here that your team is familiar with. And so essentially, once we have finalized the onboarding of that vendor, I and the rest of the team will be meeting with them to discuss next steps. And certainly one of those next steps will be doing an evaluation of what risk assessment or risk assessments are necessary. And that will be formalized and comprehensive, and I expect that it will involve all areas that need to be examined for the risk that they potentially present, including fraud risk, including anything related to finance or IT or any of the various program areas that we have here at NYCHA. And then, of course, the next step would be turning that risk assessment into an audit plan and actually performing internal audits. So that is very much in the works, very much something that we have on our agenda and in our plans, and I think that we'll have further updates for you in the very near future on that.
Okay, very good.
Sure.
So there'll be a third party that's gonna be involved in doing that work, a consultant.
A consultant will be involved, yes, and the plan is that they will be an embedded consultant that the Internal Audit and Assessment Department through me and Vilma will oversee and work with. So I think Vilma maybe has some additional information.
Just to give you guys a little context, as we had discussed with the committee members before we took that approach, NYCHA has done risk assessments and we did internal audits. As a result of the agreement and other changes that were happening in NYCHA, we took a holistic approach to look at how best to use our resources. And so we decided that one of the best approaches was to pursue an external entity with more robust experience that could conduct more robust internal audits, right? One of which they will also be conducting a fraud risk assessment. And I believe we have gotten your approval and consent to move forward with that RFP. And so we are in the final stages. We expect to award hopefully by the end of the month, and so onboarding them soon thereafter. And we will keep you abreast as we've been doing all along.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay, so I don't see any other questions, and so I believe that concludes our business. Are there any other questions? Okay, so no questions, we've confirmed there are no questions. So I believe now that concludes our business, yes, okay. So, there being no other matters that need to be addressed, I want to thank everyone for their attendance, and I believe a motion is in order to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a motion?
Are we gonna consider an executive session with just the members of the audit committee and the auditors? Which is pretty common practice with audit committees.
Is that being formally requested? If so, I'm gonna have to ask Jason to weigh in
There would
on
need to be
this.
a formal motion in accordance with the public officers law
Well,
to go into executive session.
I can only tell you that the New York City Audit Committee has such a session after every meeting. And most audit committees I sit on have that too, in the public.
I'm simply advising as to what
No, I
New
understand.
York law requires.
I don't know what everybody else feels. Well, let me look at the auditors and ask them whether they think it's good practice.
Mark, I understand the New York State Public Authorities Law, and so I mean, if there's a topic that meets the Public Authorities Law, then I think you can make a motion to go into executive session.
So, just to clarify, it's the public officers law.
Officers
Public
law.
authorities law is inapplicable to NYCHA.
To NYCHA.
I leave it to everybody else to decide whether we wanna have a session among ourselves. Right, who would the auditor? Who would the auditor?
Let's make a motion.
I.
Right, I think to Jill and Jason's point that if that is something you're looking to do, there would need to be a formal motion made and the exception or the general area that would be addressed would need to be identified. So without that, I don't think that we can entertain moving into an executive session.
I detect a certain reluctance, so I'll withdraw, but I can tell you that every audit committee meeting I sit on has a private session, first with the auditors and now without management, and then with management without the auditors, so you get a management view of how the auditors are doing discreetly, and then you get a thing from the auditors to see how the accounting people are doing. And that's pretty broadly accepted practice.
And I'll concur, Mark, that's acceptable practice for all my private companies and all of, publicly traded companies, that's generally the practice. I defer to the attorneys on the laws that govern over NYCHA.
So I would agree, we could have a committee meeting, an executive committee meeting for a few minutes with the auditor to discuss specifically the issue of whether and what they're doing with the micro purchase further review.
So what do we do to make this happen?
We have to make a motion.
Again, you have to make a motion that meets one of the exceptions as we've indicated previously.
Let me then make,
Officers'
on
law.
behalf of
It has to
myself,
meet one of the exceptions. I'll defer to counsel.
I make a motion that we do whatever our counsel suggests is feasible to make this happen.
I cannot articulate for you what the motion will be, as I am not on the committee, and none of the stated exceptions within the public officers law have been referenced in this discussion thus far, unfortunately.
They wanna know if it's something.
Well, we don't do this as a city audit. Then let me ask this, you've heard what I think if I look at my fellow members, they would like to do this sort of thing.
Yes.
And can you write a script for us, maybe not for this meeting, but for the next meeting, where you give us the words or whatever we need to do to implement this?
I'm more than happy to provide copies of the public officers law. I cannot provide a script as to the basis for the members to meet in executive session as a committee. You are able to meet individually with the auditors, but not as a committee unless an appropriate motion is made in accordance with the public officers law referencing one or more of the exceptions as Vilma has currently stated.
Why can't you tell us what resolution we need to adopt to make this happen? I don't practice law in this area, so I have no idea what the requirements are.
There's specific wording that was provided earlier to the committee concerning what words to use to make the resolution,
And I would suggest we give you ideas, right, around wording that fit with the exceptions. We have no idea what you want to meet with them about. You have to formulate it within the exception of the law. Okay? Nothing is impeding any one of you from meeting with the auditors individually, so you're not creating a quorum issue. Right? So if you wish to do that, you can do that. But as a committee, you would be creating a quorum issue if it does not fall within one of the exceptions. You cannot go to that exception.
So we just have to identify the topic that we would like to discuss with the auditor.
You have to identify and make sure it fits within one of the exceptions of the law.
With the requisite specificity.
Right.
You can follow up on the floor.
One-on-one, table this,
Okay, table.
and we'll get to it later.
So that, you want a motion to adjourn, is that what?
Yes.
Yes.
I so move.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so with that, the motion is carried. Thank you all very much. It is now 11:09 a.m. and our next Audit and Finance Committee meeting will be on December 17th, 2024. Thank you, everyone.